Hello, you're watching the Nouvel Esprit video series on the theology of the body, and this video is dedicated to audience 40. We are your hosts. I am Jeremy Hossotter.
And I'm Guillermo Moreno.
All right, so to dive in, we are going to begin with discussing the meaning of desire. So we know that we've been discussing Matthew 5, verses 27, 28 for quite a while now. And these two verses are not going anywhere. So be prepared for even more videos on these two verses. Now, the key thing we are looking at is this concept of desire, looking at the man looking at the woman with a desire such that he commits adultery with the woman in his heart. This desire, this concupiscent desire is something interior because it's within man's heart. Now, this concupiscent desire is a detachment from the spousal meaning of the body, and it places the individual into conflict with the dignity of the body and conscience. Now, there is a psychological meaning of desire. Here, JB2 is going to explicitly define a psychological and a biblical meaning. We have briefly referenced these concepts before, but now JP2 actually goes ahead and defines them. So, the psychological meaning of desire is an intense orientation towards the object caused by its characteristic value. And in our circumstances here, the value involved is the sexual value of the body. Now, the biblical meaning, it, on the other hand, will emphasize the ethical content, the fact that there is a value at stake in this desiring. So, JP2 now gives us a definition of concupiscent desire as, quote, the deception of the human heart with regard to the perennial call of man and woman to communion through reciprocal gift, end quote. Now, this perennial call is something that we've been talking about because it's that call from the beginning, from when God created the first man, first woman, to enter into that union, that communion of persons. And so concupiscent desire deceives the heart, sets the heart against this call to the communion of persons that is established through the reciprocal gift of self. Now, this perennial call, JP2 carefully observes, is mediated by the body and is not concupiscent desire. Guillermo, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate a little bit as well on we could think of the perennial call or the perennial attraction as just that say drawing toward the other person because of the opposite sex's value, because of the woman attracted to the man due to his masculinity and vice versa. And whereas desire, I would like to describe that as hand in hand with the look. So we know that Christ says that whoever looks at a woman to desire her has committed adultery with her in her heart. So it's one thing to be attracted to someone of the opposite sex, but it's another thing to just frankly lust after them, whether or not one is physically, visually looking at the other person. The desire, it's the lust that goes hand in hand with the look that Christ was talking about.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that helps tie in some concepts we have talked about previously, especially this concept of the look, that reductive looking at the other person as a mere
Okay.
object.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Guillermo.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. The eternal feminine and eternal masculine. So at the historical level, JP2 informs us that we have this eternal feminine and eternal masculine that seeks freedom from concupiscence and seeks affirmation at the level proper to personhood. So, in other words, there's this eternal feminine that I guess woman participates in, and it's kind of like a guide for women to seek freedom to live in accordance with the communion of persons and not concupiscence. And this is kind of interesting language, eternal feminine and eternal masculine. So I thought it was worthwhile to go off on a tangent to talk about this concept for a moment within the context of what we already know with the theology of the body. So, what is this eternal feminine and eternal masculine? So, in general, we know that it represents pure femininity or pure masculinity, and one possible solution of interpreting it is the Jungian archetype, which JP2 used in TOB 20 and 21 when John Paul II was describing how Adam and Eve knew each other through the conjugal act, that this conjugal knowledge was an archetype. And for more information as to what is an archetype, we did discuss this in TOB 21. There are two different meanings of archetype discussed with Jung's understanding. So there is kind of like maybe a psychological view that in general says this is kind of a universal idea that all men and women have by human nature. Okay. So all women would have this kind of psychological eternal feminine idea as part of human nature. And similarly with men and this eternal masculine. And so it would represent an archetype. There's also possible a Platonic solution. So the Platonic form is is a pure essence of a thing that exists outside of space and time, and so, and for a later Platonist such as Saint Augustine or Saint Thomas Aquinas, this pure form or essence is an idea inside the mind of God. In terms of Thomistic metaphysics, he would call these exemplary forms, whereas the forms that are like the human soul, he would call it inherent form. So it makes a distinction between two types of forms, inherent and exemplary forms. So another solution to interpreting this eternal feminine is as a Platonic form, as a thing that's outside space and time in the mind of God. And this would make some sense when when JP2 talks about the essence of masculinity and the essence of femininity and say TOB 17 and 21. This, however, would require interpreting a pure essence of masculinity and femininity as Platonic forms. And if you're going to work within, say, the Thomistic school of metaphysics, that is a little awkward because that's not really how St. Thomas or the Thomists think about masculinity and femininity. It is, however, a more consistent interpretation if you look at the phenomenological school. In particular, I'm thinking the realist school of phenomenology found in, say, Max Scheler, Dietrich von Hildebrand, and others. What is interesting is that Edith Stein talks about precisely an essence of masculinity and an essence of femininity as Platonic forms, as that masculinity and femininity are actually two species of humanity. This is actually a view of Edith Stein. And I mention Edith Stein here because JP2 is actually a big fan of Edith Stein. In fact, in Fides et Ratio, John Paul II recommends that we study Edith Stein's philosophy, that her style of philosophizing is actually something to emulate. So just as St. Thomas Aquinas is a philosopher who popes have said is a worthy model, so is Edith Stein. And one of the peculiar positions of Edith Stein is this Platonic view of masculinity and femininity. So this is not to give you an answer, but to give you some ideas. I don't think, depending on how you want to interpret the Jungian view, there is certainly a serious problem with some of that. And if you watch the video on TOB 21, you will catch up quickly which interpretation of Jung's archetypes would be a problem. And that is, of course, in reference to his universal unconsciousness, because that is a concept that is something we should really question if we're when it comes to human identity and also the three persons of God. What then we have another possible this Platonic solution. And as I said, it does have Edith Stein as a one of the philosophers who does explicitly teach. So with that, we are going to move on. If you are interested in where to look in Edith Stein's works, you can begin with her essays on women, or on woman, not women, essays on women. Guillermo, did you have anything like to add?
Not quite. I was just
Okay.
wondering if you knew if you know which religious order Edith Stein joined.
She was a Carmelite.
A Carmelite, okay.
Yep.
And I want to say that's the correct terminology, religious order, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
I think it's like discalcite, I'm not quite sure how to say that word.
Okay,
Discalcite Carmelite.
yeah.
I feel like
Okay.
I'm butchering it, but
I think it's discalced.
that's probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. No, the International Carmelite Press, I think is what it's called, publishes all of her works and pretty much all the major Carmelites. Let's see. Yeah, oh, it's the Institute of Carmelite Studies. That's the publisher. Institute of Carmelite Studies. They have the complete works of Edith Stein, St. John the Cross, Teresa Avila, and others. So if you really want to get into Carmelite spirituality, look no further than the Institute of Carmelite Studies. I myself own several of their books, so I can recommend them. All right. Now, JP2 makes a distinction between desire and attraction. He also makes a distinction between the value of the body and its masculinity and femininity and the value of the person. So we need to keep these in mind. So you have the value of the body in it as its masculinity or femininity, and you have the value of the person. And this distinction will help inform us as to the distinction between attraction and desire. So when we look at attraction versus desire, we can see immediately that they're opposed to each other. They're antithetical to each other. So attraction will free the heart and mind for communion, whereas desire, that is, say, concupiscent desire, closes the heart and mind towards communion. For attraction, you have the value of the body being properly integrated within the context of the value of the person. Whereas in desire, the value of the body is given prominence. It is being placed over and above the value of the person. And so what this means is within the hierarchy of values, because values and goods, there's a hierarchy. Some are greater than others. And the value of the human person itself is something that's much, much more greater, has greater importance than the value of the body, even though the body is something that is a value. So when we talk about how we behave with others, we need to act in a way where the value of the body is integrated with the value of the person. And when you take the value of the body and you give that more emphasis, such that you neglect the value of the person, then that right there is concupiscence, concupiscent desire. So concupiscent desire focuses on the value of the body at the exclusion of the value of the person, whereas attraction integrates the value of the body with the value of the person. So attraction has this integration and desire has exclusion. Now, attraction preserves the subjectivity of the other. So given the fact that you have this integration of the value of the body and the value of the person, this means that the personhood of the other is preserved. Their subjectivity, that is what properly makes a person a person. So that what makes man a person is properly preserved in attraction, but since you have this exclusion of the value of the person from the value of the body and desire, then then you have this the value of the person in the act of being excluded becomes reduced to becoming treated as simply an object. The other person's now treated as the other object. And so attraction, given it is properly ordered to the hierarchy of values and preserves the personhood of the other, this opens man to the spousal meaning of the body. Whereas with desire, since the other person is not being properly we're not properly disposing ourselves to the value of the other person, then this cancels the spousal meaning of the body. You cannot experience the spousal meaning of the body if you're treating the other person as a mere object to be used. Because in treating the other as an object to be used, the other person, their body is to be used for your sexual gratification. And that act of using eliminates the ability to experience the spousal meaning of the body in that very act. Are you still there, Guillermo?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Just want to check in with you.
Awesome.
All right. Concluding remarks. So just a couple of things to note. First, this looking to desire. It's an interior cognitive act of reduction. And by reduction, what we're referring to is the fact that the other person is reduced from treating their personhood to treating them as an object. The other ceases to be an object of attraction and becomes only the object of concupiscence. The other becomes an object to be used. And now we have some vocabulary. So first we want to define axiology. And axiology is a philosophical term and it means, quote, the study of the nature of value and valuation and of the kinds of things that are valuable, end quote. And next we need to define this term intentionality or intentional. And we gave a rather long discussion about this concept in TOB 25. And we did give a long discussion of it because it's actually one of the central ideas to the philosophical school of phenomenology. It's a very important concept for that school of thought. And JP2 uses that term a lot. So we dedicated a lot of time to explaining it there. Then lastly, we do have this term, an appetite, and JP2 gave us a good definition. So an appetite, quote, indicates everything that manifests itself in the subject as aspiration, and as such, it is always orientated toward an end, that is, toward an object known under the aspect of value, end quote. So an appetite, in this case, we could think of, say, the sexual appetite that is ordered towards an end. So you have what's the value known would be the value of the body, the sexual value of the other person. And so you think the sexual appetite or the sexual urge is this aspiration that's ordered towards this value. And this value is an end itself. This concept of appetites has a long scholastic philosophical tradition behind it. You'll see it a lot if you read, say, St. Thomas Aquinas. So that is one of those important terms that you need to keep back your mind if you wish to dive into scholastic philosophy and theology. Irma, was there something you wanted to add before we ended this video?
Nope.
Okay, I just wanted to double check
No,
because
thank you.
I wasn't sure based on what you said earlier.
No, we're good.
Okay. In that case, thank you for watching our video. If you have been enjoying our content, please subscribe, like, share, and comment on our social media. We have a variety of platforms such as YouTube and Facebook and other things. And if you have been enjoying our content, please consider donating some of your money towards our cause. You can do so through either Patreon or PayPal. And your financial support goes towards the maintenance of our website and the purchase of new resources so that we can continue providing you with great resources and articles and videos. Speaking of articles, if you go to our website, nouvelesprit.com, we have many articles that are free for everyone to read and enjoy. And also on our podcast, or also on our website, we have our podcast. Guillermo, do you have more information about our podcast?
Yes, in our other podcast series, we talk about a variety of topics, including trends in culture and politics. We always do so from a Catholic personalist perspective. Now, we upload our episodes onto buzzsprout.com. You can find our page on Buzzsprout through the Nouvel Esprit website under the podcast section. And then from there, you can listen to us directly on Buzzsprout, or you can locate us. You can use Buzzsprout to locate us in other popular platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.
All right. And to just clarify, if you're wondering where to find all of our social media, you can go to nouvelesprit.com/subscribe. There we have information for everything, whether you want to find our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our Patreon, PayPal, or other things. And everywhere we have our podcast distributed, it's all on that one page. And you can also sign up for our mailing list on that page. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, Guillermo?
I would just like to ask our viewers and listeners to keep us and our mission in your prayers.
Yeah, thank you. Please continue to pray for us. And with that, I will see you next time.
Bye, everyone. God bless.